is who's going to bounce back in the opposite direction in week 2 after whatever happened week 1. So this can be, a team that lost, a team that disappointed week 1, the Pittsburgh Steelers say. Are they going to bounce back and get a W in week 2? Or it can be the other way. Any team that was particularly impressive week 1 that is, in fact, potential fool's gold are going to bounce back in the other direction. So who's top of your list?
Yeah, so my number one team to bounce back and play better in week 2, and yes, this is a chalky pick. This is an obvious pick, but I'm not just saying it because of vibes and belief in your Cincinnati Bengals, your hometown team. I think the Baltimore Ravens defense is going to be problematic. We obviously did not see that at all against the Houston Texans, but they did have a ton of pressures week 1. But then if you break down their pressures by before or after 3 seconds, they actually did not have that great of a pass rushing performance. And the Houston Texans were starting a 6th-round rookie at center, a left guard who they traded for 2 weeks prior, and a right tackle who they signed 2 weeks prior. And the Ravens were solid. But again, Odafe Owe looked like the guy he's supposed to look like. Justin Madubuike had a good game, but they weren't dominant by any performance. I was watching the first half tape this morning, before the game kind of got out of hand, and C.J. Stroud was dropping back pretty much every snap. And they were winning at a probably below average rate, I would say, in under 3 seconds or even 3.5 seconds. So I think Cincinnati, you then add in probably no Marlon Humphrey still, no Marcus Williams, presumably with his pectoral injury in week 1. I think Cincinnati, we've seen the Ravens defense without Lamar Jackson hold the Bengals last 2 times they played to nothing. I think that flips, and I think Cincinnati puts up a lot of points.
Yeah, the Ravens came out of that week 1 game incredibly banged up. Like, that was a very costly game for them in terms of the injury tally. So I'm kind of with you there. I have a similar, very chalky, obvious pick. The Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is not going to have that kind of meltdown every week, and probably not in consecutive weeks. Like, it's massively concerning. It's incredibly worrying because what it showed is he's not in control of that game. Like, he cannot determine whether he's going to have that game, and more to the point, can't stop himself from having it when he knows it's happening. But I don't think that increases the frequency that it's going to show up with every week, right? Like, that was an absolute walking nightmare from Josh Allen in that game in multiple different ways, all of which were concerning, right? Whether it's the turnover-worthy plays. He led the NFL in pressures charged to the quarterback, so he caused the most pressure of any quarterback in the NFL. So you add that to the turnover-worthy plays, to the launching himself into like 3 defenders for no good reason. Like, those are 3 separate ways he had an absolute nightmare. But it's not going to happen every week, and he's too good at the other stuff, right? The big-time throws. When Trevor was on Monday, and we talked a lot about this, we kind of contrasted him and compared him to Jameis Winston. And number one, even the turnover-worthy plays are lower than Jameis Winston, right? Like, even this level of Josh Allen is not Jameis Winston level bad. And the big-time throws are dramatically higher for Josh Allen. Like, he does offset this way more than Jameis ever did, even though, Jameis threw for 5,000 yards and those kinds of things. Like, Allen makes a ton of amazing plays, and that's why you're able to live with some of the bad. Doesn't mean you don't want him to rein it in. The overall point being, that's just not happening 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I agree. They're also going from a top 5 defense in the Jets to, bottom 10 defense in the Raiders. So that should make a meaningful difference. I like that one. So my first choice for the other direction, and I'm saying this with respect now. I have respect for Sean McVay. I have respect for Matthew Stafford. I'm not going to dog them. I don't think they're going to be a top 3 pick team anymore. But the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks pass rush units are night and day. They are completely different units. I think San Francisco is going to be living in Matthew Stafford's lap. And he's not going to have the time that he did. He was 10 of 18 on throws, 10-plus yards downfield, was hitting everyone, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, name a player. They were balling out in week 1. Seattle did nothing as a pass rush unit. We know it's not going to be the case. And then the big thing for me on the flip side is TJ Watt had 3 sacks in week 1. The Niners quietly have issues at right tackle, at left guard, maybe arguably even right guard as well. But the Rams had a 30 pass rush grade from their edge rushers in week 1. It was the lowest by like 15 points, including the Chicago Bears and some other teams that don't have edge rushers. Outside of Aaron Donald, they have nobody. So I think, they'll have more time. Purdy won't have as many turnover-worthy plays, won't be under pressure as much as he was. And then Matthew Stafford is going to be getting just mauled by Nick Bosa and co. I think we see a result we more expect from those two teams in week 2.
I have a couple more bounce-back candidates in terms of bad to good, and then we'll see if there's any more the other way. The New York Giants, right? Like, you get absolutely stomped by the Cowboys in week 1. If ever there was a get-right spot for them, it's Arizona in week 2, right? The Arizona Cardinals will not cause the kind of pass rushing havoc that the Dallas Cowboys were able to. Dallas got pressure 60-something% of the time, 65% of the time on Daniel Jones. 45% of the time is like catastrophic from an offensive point of view. 65 is a joke. Like, you cannot even think about functioning as an offense if you're under pressure 65% of the time. Cousins last night in his backup offensive line nightmare was like 38% of the time, which is not low, right? So that's not going to happen unless the Barbarian truly has turned into the second coming of LT for the Cardinals. Daniel Jones is going to have some time to work. They're going to be able to function on offense. Their defense is going to cause some problems for Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals. And the Giants rather, may end up coming out of week 2 with a 500 record.
Assume the Barbarian is our guy, Dennis Gardeck. I would have to assume.
Dennis,
correct?
The Barbarian.
Okay. I would hope so. An underrated pass rusher for the last couple of years. So I love that one. I agree. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting without Andrew Thomas. It looks like he's not going to play in this game. Yeah. Obviously, one of the best left tackles in football last year. But I think Brian Daboll, we've seen him scheme around issues plenty. Darren Waller said he's going to be fine. I know he's dealing with a nerve issue in his hamstring, but I think he'll be okay. I guess I'll go back to the bad to good. Not that they were all bad, but I think the Kansas City Chiefs, and I know we're going to hear more about them later on, but look, they're not going to drop as many passes as they did in week 1. I think it was 4 or 5 we charted officially. Obviously, one of those being a pick-6 touchdown that effectively decided the football game. This Jaguars defense is still so young. We talked a lot last year going into this playoff game with Kansas City versus Jacksonville, how bad they are at covering the tight end. And then Travis Kelce, I think, had 14 catches in that game. So if we do get Travis Kelce, I think he's going to pick on Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun a little bit. But regardless, this unit's going to play better. The offensive line is going to play better. Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker are a pretty, terrifying duo at this point. But I think Kansas City bounces back and scores 30-plus points in this game.
Yeah, Kansas City was where I was going next as well. Like, they arguably should have won that game anyway, and only didn't because of, literally one of the worst wide receiver performances collectively of all time. That's what it took for Patrick Mahomes to not be able to single-handedly drag that team over the line. Travis Kelce may or may not play in this game. We'll get to that a little bit later with Vic. Chris Jones should be back, so that's one thing that's coming back in their favor. And then the other thing is that's not going to happen again, the Josh Allen effect, right? That isn't going to happen 2 weeks in a row to get the worst wide receiver performance in history in one game. So if those two things work in their favor, they're probably still able to handle the team like the Jags, who are probably at a similar kind of level to Detroit. And then the last one I have in terms of good to not good, and this is 98.5% just to annoy Tyler in the booth. But the Browns, I'm not ready to buy into it yet. And the Steelers, I'm not ready to write them off yet either. So I am clinging to my priors for at least one more week until the Browns can show me they're capable of going out there and beating Pittsburgh the way they beat Cincinnati. And if that happens, I may have to eat some crow and adjust my priors. But until then, I'm clinging to them. It's week 1. Week 1 has weird things happen, so I'm not buying it yet.
I don't know if you can see the ticker live, but Tyler has made his feelings acknowledged on the broadcast. So, yep, Sav, I hear you. I mean, hey, if they are 2-0 with 2 divisional wins, that's about as good as they can get out of the gates there. One more team I think bounces back. I could go 2 here, actually, but I will go, and this is not because I'm a fan. I think if you follow me enough, you know that the fact I'm a Bears fan is probably a net negative on my takes on them because they just bother me. But I don't think they're going to play as poorly as they did in week 1 against Tampa Bay this week. They were plus 1.5 all the way out to a field goal at a certain point. They've now been bought back off the key number to 2.5. But again, I simply don't think you could have a worse coaching plan from either side of the football in this game. We talked about it a little bit, but I think you're going to see them bounce back. And the Buccaneers, not going to say it was a fraudulent win over Minnesota, but they averaged less than 4 yards per play. They had, the turnover luck. The Vikings had 3 turnovers in that game and then 4 last night. So they're setting records for turnovers already. I just think a lot went Buccaneers' way that wasn't really, indicative of a sound process that's going to carry over. I think the Chicago Bears are going to bounce back in this game. Maybe won't have Carlton Davis, which will be very big for DJ Moore. And I think, they'll cover the field goal at least, is my estimation.